Welcome back, listeners. This is the Sound Q Garage Podcast, episode 7 with Chris Pearce. Today's guest is the definition of do-it-yourself passion in car audio. Working alone in his garage, Chris built one of the most highly modified do-it-yourself cars out there, complete with custom fabrication and even a dash rebuild. He's been competing for just 3 years, but already placed 17th overall at SBR, holding his own against shop-back bills and pro tuners. We're going to dive into what it takes to chase sound quality at the highest level when it's just you, your garage, and your drive to compete. Everybody, welcome Chris.
Hey, how's it going? This is Chris. Yeah. The car I'm using to compete, Dodge Charger platform to build a sound system in, but man, these Dodges are just rinky little noise rattling cars that get into a high level.
A lot of us run into that with the cars that sometimes they're not built all that great from the factory, but we got to get in there and slap some Dynamat or whatever your sound treatment of choice. So
Shout out Resnick.
Yeah, shout out to Resnick, right? So what first got you hooked onto car audio and the do-it-yourself route?
It's just something getting into when I had my first car, kind of like most people. That was 16, 17, just having something to do with your car, ripping up interested in music and give me something to get away driving around as a teenager. Starting out, got some car audio fabrication books. Can't remember if I ordered them online somewhere or found them at the bottom. I still have reading cover to cover multiple times sitting on my shelf, kind of what was out there, and then probably pretty janky. Ripping speakers out of Dad's minivan because it had Infinity on it. Now stock speakers that were in there. So speakers in there, I'm out pulling the ones out of the rear shelf. That build turned into too much, and that car went away after a couple years. And the next pickup truck was more into engine custom and stuff like that. So the sound system I slapped in there to make noise above the loud exhaust was head in every day. So on my next car, Charger I've had for a couple years, swapped speakers out and put the subs in like I used to, but started just doing more research. My hands just to start reading in the forums, kind of like I did with reading forums was what got me into with the engine. Like, oh, if I swap out something, then you learn, well, it's not just the exhaust, it's the headers. It's not just the headers, it's the intake. Well, it's not just that, it's this. And that's where I learned a lot with forums. So when I found DEMA, because that was popular ones, and just started learning more about it, what a DSP was, more of the higher end modification. I'm like, placing a couple speakers in a stock location wasn't going to be enough. I did that first, and I'm listening to it. I'm like, this isn't sounding like I remembered when I was like, must be missing something, or, looking at the past and rose glasses. That's when I started reading in, well, was it actually sound good? And that's what kind of started the journey I'm on right now.
So can you paint a picture for us of your garage setup? What's it like building at home?
I have a fairly garage. Kind of only fits one car. It's small to fit two. Makes it easier to work car because it's big enough to work around it. And a couple cabinets I got from jobs doing tear outs. So I got a bunch of free cabinets. So I built myself shelves, some workbenches, heavy tables and stuff. I have a fairly decent wood shop because I've been into woodworking for a long time. It shows off in some of the stuff I do with how my trunk looks. Some of my home speakers are made with that woodwork eye and skill and tools and stuff like that. In the basement and decent garage area out. Try to do a little bit of everything to fabric. Do some welding, woodworking, normal stuff you expect with car audio fabrication.
Yeah, wow. So you're like a jack of all trades?
Kind of. I've done construction for years, so it's kind of just somewhat comes natural working some sort of fabrication or building stuff.
Yeah, if you've been on the Dyma group for a long time, that's kind of how it started back in the day. I'm not sure how long you've been on there, but I think I've been on there since 2007. That's kind of like how it started. So a lot of the guys that were on there used to do their own work. What made you decide to go all in on fabricating and rebuilding the parts of your car instead of taking the easy path, like bringing it to a shop?
It was, for me, not really interested in. I'm much more, I enjoy the build, playing out the design and finished product. I enjoy working more than I enjoy paying someone else to work for me. That kind of makes that easy. Fabrication is more of something new or personal favorite vehicles that I've been into in the last couple of years. 3 years ago, I didn't know much of this hobby existed. So all my experience is just going to a whole ton of shows in that time and listening to as I can. And wild fabrication ones, the ones that you look at and you can tell above and beyond, are the ones that have always stuck with me the most and the ones I've enjoyed. And the ones, not that there's anything wrong with like a stealth OEM style that build doesn't appeal to me quite as much as seeing someone that I've ripped this apart and rebuilt this and made it my own versus something that's more just taking advantage of stock locations and doing stuff like that. So it's just my natural progression build because I'll build something crazy and I'm like, well, if this part's crazy, I need to make like, well, if I did this crazy install on the mid ranges and the mid bass needs to keep up with it. And well, if I did that on the mid bass, front subs have to be at the same level. And kind of that snowball gets rolling in my head.
So, you know what's funny? I've been in this hobby since like the 90s, maybe even actually like late 80s. A lot of us are into the sound quality and the cars that image, and the SQ guys kind of got like a pinky up reputation, if you know what I mean. It's funny that you said that the installs that caught your eye were the ones that were over the top, but the installs that always got the attention were the big one, you know, the flashy ones. It was always the ones that were like that were a lot of the demo cars and some legendary names out there. I can't think of them off the top of my head right now, but it's kind of ironic that the installs that get the attention are the big booming systems.
Yeah, it just kind of comes and goes. And it seems like now there's a little bit more of a trend for keeping stuff lower profile installs. And some people take a lot of pride in being able to do that style, have a crazy sounding system while keeping it unseen, which that's awesome in its own right. And I'm not taken away from that. Maybe one day I'll get to that point. You get tired of doing the crazy build and like, then you're like, well, maybe the next challenge is doing hidden OEM system.
So speaking of, tell us a little bit about your car. Like what's unique about your setup compared to others? I know you spoke that yours is a little on the, on the flashy side and you like that style. What separates yours from others?
Well, probably the front end dash modifications. Car that is basically a daily driver. There's not too many cars out there right now that go to the effort of pulling the dash or rebuilding the dash or corners of the kicks open to weld in enclosures and stuff like that and still be complete daily drivable car. Like there's cars that have a lot of fabrications like this, but they're more kind of cars or they can drive, but like a show car. Mine is kind of a blend between a daily driver and a show car with as much modification as I can physically fit and keep it. I mean, if you look inside my car, that's just chopped down. The whole reason for that is the Dodge Chargers have very huge hump that covers about 3/4 of the dash, starting from like the passenger airbag all the way over to the other side. That raises up, 3, 4, 5 inches. I thought that was giving me issues from, a lot of people talk about how much they like the big flat dashes on a lot of cars, and mine definitely wasn't that. I'm like, well, I think with enough work, I can make it flat. Chopped a lot of that out, spent a lot of time fabricating a flat cover to go over it, dressing it in, and learning more fabrication technique, taking time and get it all done. And you go, well, now that it's all done, I can see an issue here, or this could have been done better. So I've rebuilt the dash at least twice now, if you want to consider for a rebuild. I did the big one last winter, winter of 24, and got that. That was my main big build. After I got home from, 2023 finals, I think the first year in Birmingham. Kind of what started the whole thing was I already had a fairly full-blown system to begin with. Going down to Birmingham as my car, the motor went out on me in the middle of Kentucky. Cam and lifters started eating each other up and started tapping really bad in the middle of Kentucky. The Hemis are somewhat known to do that. So I didn't want to push it all the way to Alabama, but I wasn't going to give up on it. I rented a U-Haul truck and a trailer, nearest place I could find, loaded it up, and drove it the rest of the 6-7 hours to get there. So I knew I had to rebuild the engine. I always kind of had some plans on putting a bigger engine in this car. I had leftover parts from my old engine build I was talking about in my truck. So that turned into replacing the engine. And then while I had it down, I'm like, well, let's swing for the moon for some of these modifications I want to do. And I even had a couple people tell me, like, don't go this crazy. It's already sounding pretty good as it is. A lot of times you do these big builds, even if they come out how you think, it doesn't meet your expectations, or you kind of overhype it in your mind and it doesn't play out as well. So going in, I knew that, like, it's just the way I work. I just need to have that project. Like, the project is 3/4 of the enjoyment for me. So I like building, I like doing all that stuff. I did all the work. At the end of the day, after it's been all tuned and getting a lot of the getting feedback, keep working on it, tweaking it, been sounding the best it ever has, and it's purely enjoyable. Everything I've done, I've been very happy with, proud of a couple of those things. So it was worth it in the end of the day.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Sometimes just by changing like a mid-bass driver or some mid-range drivers changes everything completely, and you're like, why did I do that? But then you just kind of got to regroup and retune and basically test and tune until it starts sounding good again. There's something wrong with us. We're always chasing that 1 or 2%, trying to squeeze out the most we can out of our drivers or out of the build. And what part of the fabrication or the dash rebuild challenged you the most? Like, what was the hardest part doing all that custom fabrication?
I think the part that I struggle with the most, integrating the top of the dash rebuild and getting it kind of blended into the existing what was left and making it all kind of work together. The first rebuild I did, I put the car into the garage about November, I think, and then I worked approximately 7 to 8 months straight on the entire build between the engine, stuff that went along with that, and then the whole audio system. Going into it, I knew I was going to do an extreme build, and I was shooting to do it in like the extreme class, especially in Iasca Extreme Open, why they had it. So I knew going into it while I was building it, I needed to build and document it as an extreme build to be able to compete with install. Making sure I took the time to do everything right, document it all, put the time into so it was worth it in the end. That was approximately 8 months straight, and that was almost every night, couple hours after work, majority of the weekend spent on it. It was a grind, and towards the end, it was turning into a real grind, especially when the shows started coming up. I started missing the first couple of shows of the year because it was still completely torn apart, and that's the frustrating part of it. The top of the dash really kind of kicked my butt for a while, just coming up with the overall flow and how it blended in and how I could get it to fit and to stay secure. The airbags was a thing that I didn't want to lose because it's still a daily driver. I drive with my wife. She drives the car. We go to trips. So integrating, keeping the airbag functional and safe while I still had the top of the dash rebuilt was a challenge. Mick Tennis, I think, on DEMA. A lot of people know him. One of the big, most well-known judges. He saw some of the posts I was making, asking some questions like, hey, how to do this? And he messaged me like, hey, I did something real similar in one of my BMWs a couple years ago. Here's some pics on how I did it. That was a real light bulb moment on change up how I was looking at it. And I was able to get it built just like that. So that was the first build. Towards the end, some of the shows were creeping up that I wanted to be at. HVR in 2024 was the first one I was able to roll out to, and it was still like 90% done. It was kind of a rush at the end, and some of the stuff just wasn't quite as nice as what I wanted to. I just needed to spend more time ironing it out, making it look better. So I got through that year competing. Over the winter, I wanted to lucked into a set of mid-range drivers I've been looking for a while. And I'm like, all right, if I'm going to rebuild these into it, then I may as well spend some more time on the dash cover and reshape that, rework some of the HVAC vents. And I was able to beef up the inside of the dash a lot more, tie everything a lot better together, chase more rattles, just stuff that after you live with it for a year, you start getting the mental checklist in your head, like, okay, this is an issue, needs fixed, working through that. So I rebuilt the pillars, so change the position of the EMTs I'm using, and now it looked 10 times better than what it did originally. So I'm a lot happy with the work I did this spring. I spent about 4 or 5 weeks doing kind of a refresh on it.
Looking back, was there a moment where you thought, man, what the hell did I get myself into?
Yeah, quite a couple. I mean, I know I'm going to be working on one thing or the other, so it's just the project I'm in. One way or the other's got to get done. So
sometimes it's like opening up a can of worms. You do one thing and you get another problem. That's happened to me before, where I'm working on the car and I accidentally break something, or something breaks on the door, and I'm like, oh man, I should have just left this alone. So you worked with PS Sound, right?
Yeah, he's been a really big inspiration and a really big help all the way from the beginning. Right about the time I was starting into it, I think I found his channel or page, or I don't even remember how I found him, but I spent a lot of time watching the videos and then occasionally talk back and forth with him. I even did one or two consultation calls with him. One call ended up into just like a 3-hour long video chat, just sitting there talking about building stuff. So he's been a real big help. So when he came to U.S. finals of that year, that was one of the biggest reasons I kind of pushed through getting my car there, even though I was broke down halfway. So like, I'm not missing this chance to actually meet him, because coming to the States is probably pretty rare. So we were able to meet there, talk about some stuff, kind of planned out some stuff. And that's when I did the rebuild afterwards. One of the more extreme parts of what I did with my build is having pretty large. You can call them front woofer, front stuff, large mid bass, whatever. But I did my mid bass higher up in the dash inside, like the buried in the dash up higher. That was going to be my mid bass install. So I got that done first. And I'm like, all right, so I'm still using the front sub. And I need to figure out where it's going to be, probably in the passenger footwell. I didn't know if I was going to go IB or sealed or something, but I wanted something special. So after the mid bass were out of the way in the kicks, I'm like, well, I can put this front sub in the kick area, but it's going to look kind of weird just having one buried all the way over there. I start looking at the difference between the two sides and the kicks, and I start realizing that they're almost identical on each side. The frame shaped the same way. Whatever opening was on the passenger side is on the driver's side. And that got my head spinning. You know what? I wonder if I could do dual front subs. Not many people were doing that. I already had an Acoustic Elegance 10-inch that I was using as my front sub. I'm like, well, I want to use this because these are really, really good drivers. But I had waited over 4 months to get the one I had. And that was before the lead times jumped through the roof 2 years ago. I don't know if it was COVID, tariffs, or just the state of the shop on how they were building them. The wait times were past 6 months. There's no way I'm going to get another 10-inch sub. Nobody was selling them. I couldn't find one. I mentioned it to Peter one day in a message. I was like, I'm kind of thinking dual front subs would be pretty awesome to take this to kind of a standout. He goes, well, I've got a 10-inch sitting right here. I can send you it, and then you can just replace it. I'm like, well, I'm not sure if this sounds good, but getting one all the way from England, that's kind of a hassle. Don't worry about it. This is when I was buying the AMTs off of him. This was right when he was putting out his PS Sound version of the AMTs. So he was already sending those to me. A couple days later, he messages and goes, oh, hey, here's the tracking. I'm sending that sub to you. Just replace it when you can. I'm like, good grief. So he just sent it right off his shelf. A couple days later, I'd already found a used one posted up on Demo. So we just kind of exchanged and sent it back to him. That was really helpful right in the middle of the build when I didn't have time to get a new one. He's like, yeah, I'll just send it to you. Kind of went up above and beyond helping me with that. So that all kind of culminated. He was coming to Steel Valley that year. When we got there, we get to talking, and since I was one of the very few that had his AMTs. He's like, all right, well, we've been talking for so long. I want to tune your car. Jumps right in at SVR. Spends about an hour, puts full-blown Peter tune on it. And for that whole weekend, we kind of used my car as his PS Sound demo vehicle for the weekend. So
Nice.
I think he gave up demos as I did. And there was, one point, I think I was in my car for about 5 hours straight, just one after the other. And he was pulling people who were like, oh, I'm interested in your 2 years. All right, came over and gave people demos. So beats the living crap out of my car for 3 straight days. And probably pissed a lot of people off, but a lot of people had fun. So probably worth it.
No, but that's a huge vote of confidence for a guy like Peter, want to sit there and show off your car. So that shows that you're doing something right?
Yep. And then this year's SVR, he did pretty much the same thing for a guy named Adrian, who came from Milwaukee, Minnesota or Wisconsin or something. He visited the training that Peter was putting on in the area, brought his car, and Peter tuned that, and then they made it to SVR, and they used his vehicle as kind of the same thing this year. Now that mine's all kind of ironed out, working as it should, so it was like the next guy to get that treatment. Who knows, maybe there'll be someone next year.
So this year you placed 17th overall at SBR, right?
I did. This year, as kind of talked about in the last couple of podcasts, was pretty stacked. Looking ahead and talking to all our buddies and stuff that were going to start seeing the names getting released and who was all coming. We're like, this is kind of crazy for everybody coming out. There was probably like 3 cars missing that are normally pretty high up. But even then, there's a couple people missing, but we're all talking ahead of time. Like, man, if any of us place top 20, you just got to walk away and be happy with it.
Competition is pretty stiff at SVR.
It's stiff and very close. It's decided by so few points in between. Sure, it's been brought up before, but you could jump 8-10 places by you score an average of 3 points higher, you jump 10 places. So it was all really tight. Normal top 10 you'd expect are there, and then after that it's just kind of you got lucky enough to get a couple points in the right direction. And kind of funny, I'll probably never forget this, but my whole weekend, I'm like, all right, if I can score top 20, I'm going to be overjoyed. But normally I like to keep my expectations realistic. Like, hey, it might not happen. You never know what one small issue you may not even be in your car or your tune is going to, tank you 2 points, and that's the difference of making it or not. I'm sitting there and they're calling all top 20, and I'm seeing everybody go up, and I'm like, too many guys I know that can beat me are going up. and it gets down to the very, very last call. I was the last call, 20th person, and it kind of shocked me. I'm like, oh man, I actually did make it. So I'm sitting there seeing everybody go up. I'm like, oh well, I guess it just wasn't in the cards this year. And very last name, I get called up, and I about ran up there.
Yeah, that must have felt good, huh?
Yes, it did. I was very happy. And 17th doesn't sound impressive until you're actually at the show and you see the 17 cars ahead of you and a couple behind you that you're able to place ahead of, and you're just happy to be up there. So running pretty much is the tune that I've been working on from scratch over the year, and going to a couple shows, getting the feedback, putting the work in that wasn't done by anybody else. I was very happy with that.
Yeah, that's actually quite an achievement, I'll be honest with you. So the do-it-yourself guys out there that thinking about giving, not just SVR, but competing a shot, what one lesson you think you learned from competing that you'd pass on to them?
Viewing competition with the right mindset and viewing it realistically, on seeing it for what it is and what you can get out of it and what you can put into it. It's kind of hard laying in it,
No, I get what you're saying. Going in there realistically, sometimes people go in and they got a lot of blood, sweat, and tears building their car. They go in and they might not even place, and they might get mad and just, I'm not doing this no more. And it's like, you got to remember, people like you and others who have been competing or just grinding at it, you guys are also going at it on your own cars, on your own bills. There's people out there who are dropping big money with shops. Not everybody, but there's a lot of do-it-yourselfers. There's a lot of people who are backed by shops, backed by sponsors or whatever. They've already put in the time, sweat, and energy into that car. Coming in, don't get discouraged if you don't place top 20 or something like that. That's the lesson I would give guys, because I remember when I used to compete, I used to get mad and I wanted to rip out my system. And it was like, especially if you're the competitive type, my younger days when wasn't as intelligent, as wise, I wouldn't say intelligent. I'm a lot wiser now, and if I take a loss now, I'm like, but back then I would take a loss and I'd take it personal. And the shops loved it, because that was one of the reasons back in the 90s that shops loved having competitions, because people would rip out their amp or rip out their mid basses. It meant it was money for the shops, but things are a lot different now. That's just my take on it. That's just my 2 cents that, don't get discouraged. Competing is a lot of fun. You meet a lot of people, you make a lot of friends. I've got lifelong friends from the Dyma group, that I never would have met, like-minded audiophiles.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. So even if you don't win, it's still, to me, it's fun. You know what I mean? Even when I don't compete, it's still fun to me, going to the get-togethers and stuff like that.
Yeah. So kind of going into it is what I'm kind of getting at is learning to play the game, kind of figuring out the expectations competition. You keep hearing, you read all the posts on it, people complaining about competition format, like complaining about bias, complaining about, well, I've heard top sound cars and they sounded bad, or I don't like the way the judges are listening to this. You read all that. You don't know what their actual experience is, or if they showed up to one show or they've been doing it for 30 years and they notice them. Learning the game behind it and all the little nuances on how you're seating people, how you're interacting with people. Your attitude going into it makes a big difference. If you're there to learn and do better at it versus showing up thinking you got it and everybody has to accept what you got, versus kind of showing up and realizing, hey, this is what I got in order to play the game for competition and following the rules and doing it. You might have to change up your reference or how you're looking at it. And just because the one thing I always kind of see people complain about, well, I don't like having multiple tunes or a competition or a judge's tune. I just want it to sound the way I want it. We have DSPs for a reason, and it's not that hard to have even just 2 tunes. One that's the way I've kind of always done it was start off with a bass line, and then I have one tune that I kind of tweak to my own for driving in different seating position, different noise levels for driving around. And then there's a competition tune that I kind of start off with a bass line, and then I tweak that as I get feedback from the judges and what they're expecting, what they're hearing. I may transfer some of those over to my normal everyday tune. I may not, just depending on what it is. And then I find myself, when I'm driving around, I'll switch between the two, and they both have their pros and cons for just daily listening. To me, one's not worse than the other. They do different things. Like kind of my preferred genre of music I'm normally going around blasting to is like heavy metal band or heavy electronic, stuff like that. And that takes a little bit of different tuning profile than listening to some 1980s weird classic rock song that the judges are still using. God knows what reason, because they are very annoying to me, but they've been listening to the song for 30, 40 years and they know what to expect. So
yeah, they're familiar with that song, so they know what they're listening for. Although I think sometimes that some cars, like me, I have a set list of songs that sound really good in my car. And if I play those same songs in another person's car, they might not sound that good.
Kind of setting your expectations, learning the game, and not getting discouraged at the beginning because it's not matching up. Like my first year competing, and I go to SVR, I knew I was in over my head and showing up so big. I had a couple local shows under my belt, starting to getting the idea of the routine down and how the formats are handled. And like first year there, I think I placed like 35th overall.
Oh, wow.
And man, that lit a fire under me because I did not like going away with 35th place. So that lights up my competitive spirit. I'm like, well, I'm doing this. I'm not doing it that bad. I'm going to find out what I'm doing wrong and I'm going to fix it. And placing well local shows is pretty nice. And that's where you kind of go to get the feedback in a more like beginner friendly format, and you can spend more time to local shows. But when you go to the big shows, you got to use all that prior experience and bring your A game. That's kind of what sends me in a tailspin of building and doing better. And when you get to the big shows, at some point, just your name recognition and face, people seeing you around, that's what start getting you like, hey, that car's kind of special. Seen it a couple of times and you get the buzz going about it, versus some car that if you're showing up to the show and put yourself out there, you go meet some people, go listen to cars, start getting your reference set, figure out how other people are making their car sound. You start making friends, start hanging out with people, you start getting more experience, more feedback from people. It's really what kind of start the ball rolling on, when you're going to shows and you're meeting friends there and getting better, versus just showing up, not getting what you want, get angry at the format, leave and never come back. That's where you start getting the a little bit of bitterness, like, oh, the judges is just biased, they didn't like my car. Like, well, if you listen to 10 other cars and you start seeing the differences or what they were talking about, as a do-it-yourselfer, if you don't have that experience listening to cars, getting that sound in your head of a goal in your mind on this is what it needs to sound like to be competitive. That's the biggest thing. Is I've been able to sit in multiple cars going, okay, I can hear the difference between mine and yours, and that's what I need to shoot for, is to find the problem and why it doesn't sound like this. Like one of the biggest keys first finals is when I got a chance to listen to Ryan Mitchell's Cadillac, and he started playing some drum tracks and was sending the volume to like 11. And that car was so dynamic and felt so alive and real, like you were sitting at the drum set hitting yourself. That's when I got out. I'm like, I don't know how he did that, but that's what I need to get in my car to truly enjoy it. I want to feel that. And that's what started my kind of crazy build, was to get the dynamics to make it sound alive and insane, where it was more than just like a quiet 80 dB, nice, easy listening system. I wanted something that would kick you in the chest. And that's what kind of set my whole build, with bigger front end, higher levels of modification to be able to handle that. And that's been one of my favorite things with my car is, hey, if I want to turn up some crazy, stupid metal track and it sounds like I'm inside the drum kit, that's what makes me smile when I'm driving down the road. I've listened to some nice heavy metal albums at 1 a.m. in the morning, driving home from a show in New York, keep me awake. And that smile on my face, listen to the whole album front to back, and going, you know what? This is worth it. That's what I like.
For a lot of us, it's cathartic. I know when I get in my car and I just let the music play, it's kind of like, that's my getaway from the world, and I don't care how much sound cue people like. Everybody likes that kick in the chest. Everybody's like, oh, I'm not a bass head. It's like, well, when you feel nice kick drum kicking you right in the chest and it's nice and clean and nothing is rattling. It's not about being a bass head. Everybody enjoys when you go to a concert, you feel that thump. You feel that
Yep.
kick drum out there. That's what people like. It's something visceral about it that people just like. It's not about being a bass head and whatever floats your boat anyway. If you want to be a bass head, if it makes you happy and you're not bothering anybody, go for it, man. You know, if you want to, if an 80 decibel system and you want to hear every little nuance of a guitar pluck, go for it. Whatever makes you happy. I think going to these events and competing anyway, even if you come out in 50th place and you're getting in other people's cars, you're getting a reference. Like you said, you got into Brian Mitchell's caddy and you're like, okay, this is what I need to compete, or this is what I need. Even if you're not going to compete or you just want to make your car better, it's great to get in there and get a reference. What it's supposed to sound like.
Yeah, like another car off the top of my head I can remember kind of set something off my head was listening to Larry Ing's car. He's from California. I think Scott Welch has a pretty big hand in that build and tune and stuff. So I finally got to hear it at Axpona this year, and his car was really detailed. He as he's given a demo, he's kind of explains like, this is the way I like my music to sound. I don't like a very loud dynamic system. I like mine more clinical, more pure, like a home audio setup kind of. But what hit me with his was how detailed and focused his bass was, just how dialed in. And it was almost, there was bass notes that seemed small and so far away that it was a different experience. Once you start hearing bass, it's either in phase or out of phase or just doesn't quite match up. That's always hard dialing in. And once you hear it, you're like, okay, that's what I'm missing, is that level of focus and bass being locked in with the music or even behind the music. So I go home and start retuning, and he's giving me, Scott was giving me some tips on how to achieve that. And I put them in and flip them back and forth between the tune I showed up with and the tune that I left with. Like, okay, that was what I was missing in this, was that level of detail in it. You only get that if you walk up to someone and say, hey, show me what you got, and then try to get a takeaway from it.
That's what I was talking about, because you never know. Your system, you tune it a certain way, you'd be surprised what it's capable of, especially if you have, really good install, really good components in there, and you got an ear for tuning, So I know you've been on a lot of road trips and stuff like that. You got any favorite memories from the shows or the road trips where your car became more than just a competition piece?
Last fall was probably one of the best trips I've had so far. Luke O'Kellet, old Rick Wilson, he was throwing his fall get together up in Maine. It was same time frame as finals. I don't know if I want to go to finals it was a pretty long trip down there to begin with, and finals gets pretty expensive. It's a multi-day trip. It's not as fun to take the wife to, because that's a lot more like heavy competition schedule and you got to get there early, and I might not make it this year. So I decided to go to that. I took the wife with me and made a nice road trip all the way up there and hit some sightseeing spots we always want to go to. I've always wanted to see, the Northeast in the fall, and that was pretty close peak, like leaf season, color changing season. So that was kind of a bucket list trip. And I actually posted that I was going to go up there and I was going to try to make a road trip out of it. And one of the DEMA members that lived in the area, I don't know how to exactly pronounce his DEMA name, was like Schuler or Schiller or something like that, reached out and gave me a very detailed list of multiple different ways I could go through Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, certain sightseeing places to go. It's like a very detailed, like, if you're going to go this way, take this road to this town, take this road out to this town. This is a good drive. And then he kind of pointed out Mount Washington. And I looked into that, came up with a road trip, and we hit Niagara Falls, drove through upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire. We drove all the way up to the top of Mount Washington on the private road that they have. I think that's the highest peak in the eastern U.S. All the way up. That was awesome. That was absolutely awesome experience driving up there. So that was one of the best road trips I've taken in a while. And one of my favorite things about competition and the meetup scenes is I like traveling, and this gives me very good excuse to be able to drive out of state and go to places I wouldn't be going if I was just sticking around the house for the weekend instead. So been out to Chicago for Axpona, Alabama for finals, Virginia for some of the DEMA meetups, New York a couple times, Maine. The traveling is honestly one of my favorite parts when I have time and they're able to make it.
Not just sometimes meet members that you never even met in person and you've been talking to for years, and also just get to meet up with members and friends that you do have, but you only get to meet in person at these get-togethers or the competitions. It's always nice, you start to develop a close friendship with a lot of people. But yeah, I missed Luke's get-together this last go-around. I wanted to go, but I had to work. I was upset I couldn't go. That was a good one too. And I've seen your car several times. I've wanted to get a listen, but every time that I try to get a listen, there's like a people sitting there doing demos. You're doing demos for, and people want to hear my car, and I just never got around to it. I got to plunk my butt in that front seat, driver's seat, one of these days. Next time I see you.
So which shows were this? Where we almost run into each other?
I saw your car at HBR. You were there this year or last year? Were you there? You were at both, weren't you?
Last year, I had plans to do a different show this year in Cincinnati. I passed on HBR, but then the Cincinnati show got canceled, so I missed both of them.
And then I think I saw your car at Luke's. You were at Luke's get together last year, weren't you? Or the year before?
Been last fall. The fall event.
I was at that one, and I didn't get to sit inside. I had to leave early. I was there for, I think I got there from like 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. and I had to leave at 2 or 3 or something like that. I had to work. I came in with my work outfit and everything. I had to take off, and I didn't get to listen to your car. And
crazy to miss each other. Nice meeting.
Yeah. The last time, like at HBR, I was dying to hear it because everybody was telling me about how you had the kick panel mid bases and you did a bunch of welding in the kick panel areas, right? Is that where you did the?
Yeah, in like 2 locations on each side of the kick. So there's in the kick is where the subs are at, and then directly above it there's a bunch of welded stuff for the mid base right above it. So
Alan was like, you know Alan, right?
Alan is probably one of my biggest fans. I think he talks me up to anybody that'll listen.
Yeah. I
think he's president of my fan club. I love Alan.
That's
I've
awesome.
heard his car multiple times. I see him a lot of shows, and every time he comes over, he just has the nicest thing to say. I love Alan to death.
Yeah, he got out of your car and he's like, "Oh, you got to listen to that car." And I was like, and then you just had multiple people listening. You were doing demos for a bunch of people, so I never got to listen to it. And then I seen the pictures of it.
It was pretty rough then. If we ever get the chance, at least it'll be better than that time.
What's the biggest piece of advice you got to someone starting out in their garage? This is for the do-it-yourself listeners out there.
Watch a bunch of PS Sound videos.
That's actually really good advice right there.
Yeah, I mean, if you need inspiration, or he's got so many fabrication tips, and if you take it a step further and do the Patreon, which I've been on for almost since it was started, there's so much information that's out there. So really one of the biggest reasons I'm at where I'm at is just from the hundreds of hours of research and just watching videos and absorbing all that knowledge that he's putting out there. That's one of the biggest things. That depends on your background of hands-on fabrication skills. Not that you can't learn it. If you got that little bit of a background and you just need the inspiration, kind of just need your head pointed in a certain direction and told, go that way. That's a big help.
Peter's pretty passionate. I've actually watched his videos probably 2 or 3 times. Each video. Yeah. He's got such good nuggets on there that anybody who's into car audio would be stupid not to watch his videos. But what's the difference between just building a regular system for your enjoyment and building a competitive system?
The level of sound deadening, probably.
That's a common theme from all the competitors. And
you can put the hundreds of hours into fabrication and system design and all that, and you get it all finished and you show it off to someone and they go, "This is awesome, but yeah, you still got to chase some rattles." That's disheartening to say the least.
And it's rough on some cars too, right? Like you said, you were chasing rattles in your car at the beginning. My car was cheaply built, so it was a pain in the neck.
Yeah, just thin metal, thin plastic and stuff like that. But talk to some of the guys that have done the Volvos and the foreign cars and stuff like that, and they're like, "Yeah, I went through 3 or 4 Sawzall blades trying to vent my kick panels. They're going through this frame, burned up a bunch of grinder discs, and the Sawzall blades were shot." And I'm like, I could have used a hammer and a chisel to get through mine, just peeling back the thin. Right now, I don't know if you've seen it. I haven't posted too much because I started the rebuild and I got busy with some very pressing home projects that needed done. But I gutted my trunk about 5 weeks ago, just so it was gutted out and left me no choice but to finish it. So right now, probably next week, I'm going to be starting on it again, and I'm going to make a push the next couple weeks to try to make it to finals in October in a month. So I'm going to be busy on it, but I'm rebuilding the trunk now to put 2 18s in true IB, one in each rear quarter panel.
Oh, wow.
And pretty much the same way I did the front end, cutting the entire back corner of the car out, welding in a new structure and mounting them. And I've got some ideas for refreshing the look of the trunk. And that's kind of where I saw how flimsy a lot of the sheet metal is on these cars. Once it's cut out, very hard to rebuild a structure back to stiffen everything up to be at the level it needs to be. So that's going to be probably starting Monday. I think I got time to get back into this. I think in the next month, I'm going to be on a pretty big crunch, and I'll be back to posting updates on DEMA couple days on my progress. So interested to see what the second refresh of 2025 will look like. It's coming soon.
Okay, so you're getting back in there, huh? Now, or what do you wish you knew when you first started? Now that you've been through the grind and in hindsight 2020, and you're like, oh man, I wish I knew this when I first started. Would have saved a lot of headache, a lot of money, a lot of time.
Man, that's kind of a tricky one. So it's more like just as you're just kind of honing your skills the more you tear into it and the more problems you get past and overcome. And I don't know if I could say like one, it's like something I wish I knew before I started out. There's been a lot of stuff that I've had kind of a vision in my head the whole time. You pre-planning out the build and having the end goal in sight is what saves you the most headache of not tearing into it too quick without knowing what's going on. Because the couple parts of the project here and there where I'm like, all right, well, I know what I want, but I don't have a picture in my head of getting there. That's where you start losing most time because you're kind of making it up on the fly. Really, the pre-planning and pre-research and having an idea what you're getting into saves you more headache in the long run versus just ripping apart and then staring at an empty canvas, not knowing where to start.
Yeah, I think one of the things I wish I knew, because I would get in there and I wish I knew how important the tuning was. I feel like that's really that's one of the single most important things besides the sound deadening and the sound treatment. I think that's like number one, but tuning is like number one dash A, 1-2 when it comes to doing your system. Because it like I've gotten in the car and been like, man, this sounds like crap. And then I had a buddy of mine tune the car and it just totally transformed the car. When I was about to rip components out, start doing things again, and and the components were fine. It just needed a good tune, you know?
I think the tuning part comes with the more cars you're able to listen to of other people's. It becomes more apparent. Like tuning is absolutely like the final cherry on top. Even the best tune still can't cover up flaws in your install or location choices. You can get it to sound really good in the end with the tune, but if you're sitting there picking it apart clinically, a lot of stuff in the install makes a big difference in the final outcome as well. The install is just as much trial and error as the tuning is. Like my basic locations have been pretty close to the same since I've started 4 years ago. There's just been slight tweaks in the install or how it was put in or where tweeters were mounted. I've played with a bunch of different positions for tweeters, and that ends up making a big difference. Even if it's tuned correctly, there's still stuff you can't physically get around that makes a difference in the presentation. Not as much overall sound, but in the presentation of stage dimensions or location, stuff like that. So the install just comes from trial and error, and that sometimes you just can't get around that, where it's not as much the component as just the location.
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot of testing and tuning, and I think sometimes half the fun is the journey.
That's the way I look at it. Like I keep getting people saying, well, why are you doing so much? I'm like, well, I honestly enjoy the build as much, if not more, than the end result. I'm like, yeah, don't do that. It's not worth it. No, actually, I know it's not worth it. I just enjoy the process.
Yeah, exactly. It's the hunt, last extra percentage of, it's good, but I think it could be better. I think a lot of us are like that. We just keep on tinkering, and I know I got more money in my car than I care to even admit. And I think to myself, just wish the kick base was a little bit better. What can I do? And it's like, sometimes I got to stop myself. It does get expensive quick. I don't even think about the money anymore because to me, it's the smile that it puts on my face. So Chris, we're going to wrap it up. So you got your build thread on Dyma, right? On the Do-It-Yourself mobile audio website. And also you got a video with Peter, the man himself from PS Sound at SVR on YouTube, correct?
There's 2 videos from Nick on the Resonix channel on my car too. He did one at the first finals, and then he did one at Luke's event. And then I have the one at Peter from Steel Valley this year. There's a couple ones.
And what's your handle on Dyma? So if the listeners want to follow your journey online.
Chris P2493.
Chris P2493.
Yep.
All right, buddy. Well, that wraps it up, man. Thank you for coming on. Hang on for a second, okay? I'm going to put a bow on this and wrap it up.